Now, obviously, if you're going to run one of these rotor cassettes, it does fit a Shimano HG, but it's a little large. That 10-tooth cog doesn't tend to fit in a frame easy. So I put a shim in mine that's about this big. It doesn't have to be quite that big. It can be a little bigger, but 2.8 to 3 mil is enough for my bike. Basically, I just need to clear the chain around this. And there's lots of movement in these frames. I mean, I'm putting no pressure on this at all with my hand, and I can move it like 5 mil. So I don't think personally that this is going to make a difference, but it allows me to run this. And so now we're going to put this 1052 on here and see if this 93 mil cage from the mountain bike derailleur will work to run a 1052 with the gravel derailleur. Now, as you can see, with the 13-speed rotor installed in the shim, you do have enough clearance in here for the chain. I added a little bit more to this new shim that I made since I lost the old one, but you'll also see you're a lot further away from the spokes than you were with this ZTTO, which was right up against them. So that's what allows you to have that 10-tooth, is that it just kind of moves it out and on the outside of the HG unit. So this is an HG compatible 1052. Now we're going to find out if it's compatible with this range, with this cage. Alrighty, going to give you guys a little information on the initial setup and calibration of a non-standard cassette. And what's the difference between a non-standard cassette and a standard cassette? A standard cassette like this ZTTO has standard cog spacing, industry standard. And what that means is it's already programmed into the Wheeltop system, and all you need to do is use the initial calibration to find the center on the number one cog, and it should shift all 13 gears fine. In fact, you shouldn't need to adjust or fine-tune anything other than the initial calibration on a standard cassette. Now, if it's not a standard cassette like this one, you're going to have to find the spacing between the cogs, and here's how you do that. You're going to follow the directions. You're going to go and you're going to assign your 13-speed or whatever speed cassette. Wake up. Okay, you're going to obviously start off in gear number 1, because once you've assigned the cassette, you're going to go into initial calibration. And then you're going to center your derailleur cog there directly underneath cog number 1. You're going to ensure that the chain is not touching cog number 2 on the bottom and that they're not rubbing. Once you've done that, you're going to leave initial calibration and go into fine tuning. And then you're going to shift to gear number 2. And you're going to repeat the process. You're going to use the fine-tuning app to center the derailleur now underneath gear number 2, directly centered, so that the chain is not touching gear number 3 and it's not touching gear number 1. Then you're going to do the same thing, go to gear number 3, or cog number 3. And you're going to repeat this process again, ensuring that it is dead center using the fine-tuning app for gear number 3 or cog number 3. Make sure the chain's not touching cog number 4 and cog number 2. Once you've done that, you now start at number 2 and you add that difference to number 3, then that same thing to number 4, to number 5, to number 6, to number 7. So you'll start off, mine was 0 and 195. So 0 would be your number 1, 195 would be your difference to number 1 to number 2. I don't know what that number means, doesn't really matter. Then from number 2 to number 3, it was 135. So what you do is you add 135 to 195. And whatever that is, you add another 135 to it. And you just continue on your way up to the 13th cog, adding 135 to whatever value you had for the last cog. That's that simple. It's not really complicated. Now, once you've done this, if you find that you're still not quite getting into gear number 13 or you're overrunning gear number 13, then you may need to take that 135 and subtract anywhere from 1 to 5. Maybe make it 130. And then you start again with number 2 and you add 130 all the way up to number 13. Mine was 135. I got it right the first time, and I only needed to make a few minor adjustments in these three to make the shift more snappy. And also I did make a 5-point tune on the number 2 to get a slightly better shift. So again, you shouldn't need to make massive adjustments, and the spacing between the cogs in the app had better be very close to the same on every gear, plus or minus 5. If it's not, you don't have it set up right, and that's why your Wheeltop system shifts like garbage. Mainly because you probably screwed up in the initial calibration phase and didn't realize that all the values from number 2 to number 13 have to have an even spacing. That's basically the secret to setting up a non-standard cassette, or a cassette that does not have industry standard cog spacing like this ZTTO 13 or the ZTTO 12 or the Shimano 11 that I have. And it's exactly the same from TX, GEX, and OX. This is how it's done.